7 minutes. 7 minutes. Welcome to this week's episode of This Week in Perfect Team. I'm your host, DRC, and joining me tonight is your kidneys. And this show is where we take the cards that were just dropped and provide instant community feedback. Let you guys know what we think of them, let you know where we think they might particularly fit into the developing meta on the tourney scene, on the main league scene, and really try to break it down for you guys in real time here. Thank you for joining us. Tonight we're going to be going through 12 Fall Phenoms, 12 Players of the Month cards, and then we do have one surprise that we've prepared for you guys at the end here. So let's see who's in the chat. So if you are here, go ahead and say hello in the chat. Make yourself known, make your presence known, but keep it clean. If this is your first time with us, go ahead and click the follow button and click the notification so that you're notified whenever we do go live. Good to see you, Chuck. Good to see you, Dave, Kyle, Wallace. Before we do get started, though, I wanted to give somewhat of a programming update. So as you guys all know, I've been trying to pop up some new streams and give you guys some more content and maybe look at some things within the Out of the Park universe a little bit different from a streaming perspective than other people that are out there. And so I wanted to share what's been somewhat formalized in terms of how I'm going to schedule my appearances here for you guys. So Thursdays we'll continue to do This Week in Perfect Team. Today we're going on right now at 11. The past couple weeks it's been closer to 11:15, so there might be some play there, but you can expect us coming on after Rich gets done with his stream. And Rich obviously follows Chris. On Sundays, I'm going to add, and I did this last week unannounced, just kind of popped it up, and a good group of people joined and followed. But I'm going to start streaming the Perfect League World Series. So I'll do your play-by-play, but more than that, I hope to be able to provide insight into the matchups and then into the moves that the managers are doing in response to one another. So kind of the cat and mouse game of a given World Series as they're playing with the starting pitchers that they're using, as they're modifying their lineup. Is someone doing a pseudo starter? Really break down that element of it, in addition to the play-by-play, which definitely is not my main calling. And I do have an asterisk on this because I'll only be able to do this as long as I stay within the Perfect League. So as anyone here who has had any time within the Perfect League knows, your stay there is temporary. So eventually you will get relegated. Eventually you will be back in a Diamond League. So I plan to do the World Series broadcast up until it is impossible to do so. And I'm also debuting a new show on Tuesdays. So we're going to call it Reading Between the Lineups. And the idea for the show really is built off of what I believe to be the strength of Out of the Park and the strength of the community. And that's really the people within it. So I wanted to have a show where I brought on some of the larger personalities, some of the more influential players, some of the more successful players, and maybe even down the road get some people that perhaps work at Out of the Park or at least tangentially connected to Out of the Park or the game that we play with one another, and bring them on and do really like an interview type show. Sit them down, ask them some questions about how they play, about how they got into this game, about the things that they derive satisfaction from, and really kind of have it be a community show where we can learn more about not only how one another plays, but learn more about who's behind the screen name. The guest for this coming Tuesdays will be announced later. Hopefully you guys like the show concept. I'm certainly excited to bring it to you guys on Tuesday. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the cards. First, we've got Reb Russell, and Rich really did not slow roll us here. He started with arguably the most interesting card that we got tonight. So, your first instinct is to look at the pitch ratings, and you see a low stuff, high movement, high control pitcher for a low diamond card, but that's really burying the lead. What makes this card unique is over in the bottom right. It's the batting ratings. You've got a gigantic contact number, you've got a gigantic power number, and then if you look in the top right, you've got some stock defense there for right field. So the first question that I had is, what's the avoid K? If the avoid K was playable, if the avoid K is something other than a total train wreck, this card is going to be able to hit within diamond tournaments. And that's why I'm lucky to have Kidneys with me. Kidney's already been on the case. I know he's sleuthed and successfully found that avoid K rating and has his own thoughts to share about this card. So your Kidneys, I'll bring you in now, here. What do you think about this card, and what have you been able to learn?
Love it. It's a good pitcher. Certainly cap tournaments, diamond tournaments. I mean, Tommy John comparison. Tommy John's somebody I ran in the beginning of Perfect Team. So I love that comparison, high control, high movement type pitcher, low on the stuff, which isn't going to cut it nowadays in like the high level of play, but certainly will cut it in a tournament, probably high contact, high power. He has low I, so only comes in at 36 I overall, and those avoid Ks come in just below 70, 69 versus right, 63 versus left. Certainly going to play with that bat. He is very heavy versus right splits, 96 contact versus right, 116 power versus right. Versus lefty, 84 contact, 106 power, 63 avoid K. Right field defense with 47 outfield range, 93 error, 65 arm. Certainly can play him in the outfield in a tournament. So really interesting card. This is your new cap god. Really interesting. I know the first one sold for 300K to our friend Kyle, who's in the chat right now. Oh, you're saying it's 85 contact. So the image I have, I got it from Chris. Must be a little outdated. So yeah, I mean, really cool card. I love this one. This is just really interesting. So
yeah, so I guess it gets into the question of what is the best way to deploy a two-way player. You've got someone here who can play two ways, who's optimally deployed as a two-way player. So what have you seen be more successful? Using that two-way capability out of the bullpen, or using that as a starter and then having the dead day that happens before that pitcher gets thrown out in the rotation?
So in my experience from both playing offline and in the game, the AI tends to handle two-way players better when they're used out of the starting pitching role rather than in the bullpen. And they get that one day starting, and then they get the 4 or the 5 days off playing, while the other starters go, and then they get their another shot. So pretty much I think they have to start, and then you can play him in your right field when he's not starting. And this guy's going to mash right-handed pitching when he's not starting. So, and he'll be really good when he does start. So, adds to another lineup of guys like Carruthers and Tannehill who can hit, and he can field even, which is really cool because I don't know if the other ones can field as well as he can. So, and actually, he's not even that bad of a base stealer either. So he's got a 74 stealing bases and 76 base running. So really interesting card.
Yeah, very interesting card. And you named someone that I found as his best comp, Bob Carruthers, or his most appropriate comp, I should say. He's basically Carruthers' doppelganger, a little bit better on the stuff, movement and control from general, better across the board versus lefties, and then give some, lose some against righties. So that's really his pitching comp. But if memory serves, his hitting and his stock defense blow Carruthers out of the water. So I think he's definitely a better mousetrap of that same ilk. Moving on, we've got Dan Heron next. And Dan Heron certainly isn't as unique as our prior card here and doesn't quite have the nuanced analysis. But what you do have here is a low diamond that is split neutral. It's got very good control, and he's also got that highly coveted ground ball profile. So certainly no slouch. I mean, from the pitch mix you have here, which is 6 different pitches, only one of them breaking through the 80 rated barrier. This is not someone who's going to get a very significant stuff boost going to the pen. And given his profile here, I don't know why you'd really want to go down that road anyway. So I think what you have here is a diamond tournament starter and not much else. But what do you think?
Yeah, certainly. Maybe even in a cap tournament because he's got a lower end rating, of 92. Like to see the ground ball out of him. He's got kind of a profile I liked at the beginning of Perfect Team, to an extent where you got a higher stuff, higher control, and you sacrifice in movement, so you give up those home runs. a little bit, but you get more out of like the raw pitching potential, more of a SIERA build, a Sierra build. And yeah, so you might see him a little bit in tournaments. Nothing too special here. And I don't know. Maybe that's about it.
Yeah, and so as you look at this card, just to confirm that it's not going to be one that's going to play in a high-level Diamond League or the Perfect League, his number one comp is Jim McCormick versus lefties. You see that over here on the right side of your screen. He's basically a doppelganger there for what McCormick gives, and McCormick absolutely would be destroyed within the Perfect League if deployed against left-handed pitching. So this is, again, not a card that's going to be deployed at the very high levels, but I think could find a use, as you said, in cap tournaments or in the Diamond tournament meta. Moving on, we've got Chuck Hafey. Chuck's a left fielder. Another low diamond card here. One that brings a lot of contact and a lot of power, but certainly lacks within the avoid K and the I realm. As we look at his defense here, he's someone who is great when he can get to the ball, but his challenge is not being able to get to that many balls. A decent base runner who's able to outperform, again, that average speed. And what might be important for this particular card is he's coming stock with defense at all three positions. Decent with 64 in left and passable with 60 in right. How well do you think this card plays?
I really don't. The issue with this card is we're looking at a card with really low void Ks for this late in the game. He likes to hit right-handed pitching, but that's his weak side with avoid Ks. He's going to strike out 200 plus times a year against those guys, and then his higher side rating is against left, but he only has 86 contact versus left, right? And so you got that weird balance, and then you want to play him in a corner, but he only has 46 range, is like kind of DH territory almost, but he doesn't really have the bat to be a DH. So it's kind of a rough one. I don't really see a spot for this card too much, and I don't really think he'll make an impact pretty much anywhere in the meta.
Yeah, and as you see, that PEL OPS column within the bat similarity score table is completely naked there because there are no hits. So none of these comps play at the high levels. None of them play it within Perfect League. So this is a low diamond that's not going to play at the highest levels and really is a DH. And I'm not exactly sure the type of league or team that would be able to make too much use out of Chick Hafey. Moving on, we've got Bob Welch, a right-handed starter. And one of my favorite profiles within this game is that of the reverse split starter. And that's exactly what Bob Welch is here. He's a right-handed pitcher who brings more stuff and more movement versus left-handed batters. This is not one that's going to get a huge stuff boost going into the pen with 5 pitches here, although a couple of them are relatively well rated there. A card that probably is just that, a starter, not one that's going to level up too far within Diamond, probably one that caps out in the silver level, maybe gold. And the comp similarity scores tell you that as well. There are not many cards there that you see at the higher levels here, but what do you think?
So I actually kind of like this card. If you're like in like a gold level or below, I think he's a pretty good card. He's got really nice reverse splits. Issue is control is going to be a little too low for a higher level. But overall, not bad. He's got an okay split on ratings. More. When you're a right-handed pitcher and you see stats that are, more favored against left-handed, that's going to be favorable because left-handed batters normally hit right-handed pitchers harder, right? So he'll actually counter hitters that are meant to beat him. So it's a good split there. His control is one of his better numbers, right? So he almost hits 90 with control, which is good. I see some questions in the chat asking, how does he compare to the Bob Welch, the tournament card in the game? He's a little bit worse than that card. It's probably one of his bigger weaknesses. But overall, like I said, if you're a newer player and you see this card, he could certainly play for you up into gold as a starting pitcher, which, not bad there.
Yeah, you touched on something there that I wanted to expound upon a bit here, and that's the rising tide of requirement within each given category as we're looking at the evolving meta. So movement, control stuff. I know that within your spreadsheet, and for anyone who doesn't know about your kidney spreadsheet or doesn't see him posting that on the Discord, you definitely want to check that out. It's an incredible asset that includes all of the known player cards within the OOTP universe, has them ranked by projected and mathematically backed regression analysis on fit for pitchers, as well as I believe it's OPS or WOBA for hitters. Definitely a great resource. But as you're seeing the meta evolve, what are you seeing as those lower bound thresholds that you need to be above X movement? You need to be above X control to really be able to compete within today's meta.
I mean, I think it's a little more relative than people think. So you can see a card like Maddox, right? Who, because he has 95 plus movement and control, he can have only 90-ish stuff, right? And he can do well, right? But for other cards, because they have lower stuff and movement and control, they need a higher stuff rating. But I think in general, you need at least 90, 95 control. You need at least 80 movement. You need at least 100 stuff. And if you have all those things together, that's what makes you an end game pitcher. So you need those kind of numbers. If you're a hitter, you really need 80 avoid K at this point. You need, really upwards of 90, 100 contact, really 100 contact and 80 avoid K to even be competitive right now at your current split.
Yeah, I think we'll probably touch on this discussion more when we get to the Newhouser card.
Yeah, for sure.
Moving on, we've got Al Spalding, which is an extremely split-heavy right-handed starting pitcher here, who does okay versus right-handed batters, but really, really, really struggles versus lefties with a very low stuff, very low movement, very low control. The pitch values aren't off the charts. It's only 4 pitches, but only one of them breaks 80, so I don't know how big the stuff boost is going to be. This definitely needs to be deployed in the pen, and let's say you get somewhere between 7 and 11 on the stuff there. For a low diamond league or a gold league, maybe that's something that can be competitive if you have him in a specialist role, or if you're making sure that he's following a lineup that only has right-handed batters in it. But this profile here and that risk factor, the risk that he runs into a left-handed batter that's got bad plans for whatever pitch he's going to throw, I think is too high to stomach. But what do you think?
Yeah, out of left-handers, he's really a little bit too weak, right? Like, that's a silver level card against left-handed pitching. And as a right-handed batter, like I was talking about before, right? If you're a right-handed pitcher, left-handed batters are going to, really hurt you, right? So he's going to, left-handed batters are going to come up. And actually, it's his first left-handed pitcher on the screen. That's actually a typo on their end. That's interesting.
Yeah, but, I noticed that last week.
Yeah, that's weird. Anyway, it should say versus left-handed batter, but when left-handed batters come up, they already get a boost versus right-handed pitching, and then it's his weak side as well. So he's going to be playing like a silver level card, and they're going to be playing with a buff, and it's just not going to look well. It's going to be really ugly. So I don't think this card can play, even though versus right he's phenomenal. It's very bullpen only, because bullpen, the AI will try and get better matchups out of a card. If you are going to play him, I would probably try and avoid it. He does come with 63 first base rating, I just noticed, and he has contact at 70. So maybe if he had like 70 avoid K, you could play him in a cap out of the bullpen and first base flex him. I don't know. Yeah, I just noticed that. Maybe that's some sort of a play. I did want to throw out there, somebody in the Discord, I forget who mentioned, it was Jazzy Jesus mentioned, there is no splits on this card in Baseball Reference. So I would love to talk to Chris and ask how they actually got the splits for this card, because this card comes from like the 1870s. I just a random stat. I'm curious.
Yeah, I don't know. They must have some thoroughly sourced intel that tells them that he destroyed right-handed batters and really struggled against left-handed ones. Going over to the comp table on the right side here, you see that his best comps versus lefties are actually low gold cards. We've got Britt Burns 80, Lee Meadows 80, Noah Syndergaard, that might be a live card. So either way, it's definitely not pretty and not something that you want to be risking. You mentioned something there that if you throw them in the pen, you're more likely to get favorable matchups, and by favorable we mean right-hand pitcher versus right-hand batter, and that is true. But that is also a slider, so you can go into your settings and you can jack that all the way up if you want your AI to always be matching when your relievers are rested, to always be matching a right-hand pitcher versus a right-hand batter for at least batter one, and the same thing for lefties. Now, with the bullpen rule, where you have to have at least 3 at-bats per new pitcher that comes in the game, there's no guarantee the guy that comes after that right-hand batter isn't going to be a lefty who's going to hit a game-winning home run. But you can at least guarantee yourself that first batter if you jack that slider all the way up, which is what I choose to do.
So interesting. Chuck is saying it's because he's a submarine pitcher is why they gave him such drastic splits. So that's just fascinating tidbit to me. That's all.
Moving on, we've got Ellis Burks. Ellis Burks, a 95 Boston Red Sox card here, and one that's got a pretty balanced profile. Versus left, versus right, not too splitty here, a little bit better versus lefty, and then, of course, you add on the boost that you talked about of being able to face the offhand pitcher, because left-handed pitchers are worse against right-handed batters. So he will be better against left-handed pitching, but he won't be a total train wreck versus right. From a base running perspective, pretty solid here. You've got the stealing 11 over the speed, which is the relationship that you want to see there. And you've got decent stock defense across the board here. 68 left, 62 center, 63 in right, with decent range underpinning it. Now, nothing here says that this is going to be a card that plays at the high level, but Kidneys, is this something that could fit into a cap tournament or a diamond tournament?
I mean, his defense is playable. His bat it's a little weak first right, and it's a lot weak first right with the 55 Ks, and it's kind of weak V left. And the problem is there is, I think, an SE version of this card that is just a bit better across the board. I think it's a 99. So I think you're a little bit struggling to play this card over the other version of it. And on a budget, I don't really see a place where this card fits in over some of the more cheaper cards, especially versus the comps. I see in similarity scores, you have that 93 Mookie Betts is an excellent budget card if you're a new player. Was one of my favorites when I was starting out. So I'm not entirely sure what you would do with this.
Yeah, we got a question in the chat from Invictus asking about the slider for handedness. You're absolutely right. It doesn't take into account the stats. It doesn't take into account any deep level of artificial intelligence trying to match the player against someone or how split dominant a particular card is. It's purely matching handedness. So if you've got the slider jacked all the way up and there's a right-handed batter at the plate and your AI is pulling your pitcher, he's going to try to find a right-handed pitcher for you, and it's as simple as that. And the minutia of how you have your role set within your bullpen will then take over and determine which person gets placed in if you have multiple rested guys. Moving on, we've got AJ Burnett, 95 rated starting pitcher here. You've got the ground ball profile, which we all like. High stuff, very questionable control, but pretty solid movement here. What do you see with AJ Burnett?
So I'm going to take turn to talk about AJ Burnett and talk about the importance of control. So last year, there was some stats thrown around called, if you remember, if you played last year, it was 1 for movement, 2.4 per 1 for stuff, 2.4 for movement, and about 1.5 for control. And that was weightings. And what that means is how much you valued each point of each stat. This year, what I have is around, it values control about like 2 times more than every other stat. So when a card has low control, you're just not going to get a lot of value out that. And that's mainly because of the order of operations, right? Really, how the game checks to see if something happens in an at-bat is the very first thing it checks is if the batter walks, right? So if a card has low control, he's going to walk the batter before he even has a chance to strike him out with that high stuff. So really, if you want a strikeout pitcher, he needs to have good control to be able to strike out a lot of batters consistently, right? So I don't see a lot from this card, even though it's got a ground ball profile, decent movement, decent stuff. It's just going to struggle at a high level with the Avoid K meta.
Yeah, so you mentioned that if you want a card to strike out a ton of people, you need to have good control. So when you see a card like Dwight Gooden or the new Bob Feller, like obviously those cards have questionable control and they do rack up tons of strikeouts. So are you just saying to rack up those strikeouts without also walking the planet at the same time?
Um, yes and no. I think like let's say you take Dwight Gooden and you give him more control, he would get more strikeouts, right? To a degree, because there is the baseline, right? But actually, if you increase the control, he would walk less people. He would then get less strikeouts. There is a little bit of the argument I was just having with API, if you recall, in our the Discord about whether it's individual pitches versus full sequences,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that does complicate things a little bit, but so it does lead directly either way a little bit to more or less, but it does depend on the baseline. So it's yes, Doc Gooden still has a really high strikeout, even though he has low control because he has 170 stuff coming out of the bullpen, right? But if you gave him more control, he would have more strikeouts, right?
And so this is probably the argument between strikeout percent versus K per nine.
Correct.
So his K per nine probably is unchanged with control changing, but he would have a higher strikeout percent because the percentage of plate appearances that he's getting strikeouts would be higher, whereas K per nine is really just looking at the percentage of outs that are strikeouts.
Exactly. Yes.
Moving on, we've got Skip Lockwood. Probably the coolest name we had tonight. I know I'm a pretty big fan. There's the 96 Mets card. Pure reliever. However, it is as much as it can be, a boosted stamina reliever at 22 instead of the stock 17. And then as you look at him, he's a right-handed pitcher who has right-handed dominant splits here. 9 more stuff against right-handed batters, 5 more movement, a little bit more control as well. And again, he's already a reliever, so no stuff boost here. As you look at who he comps to versus righties, which would be his dominant side here, you've got Al Holland, who's actually a lefty, Tom Gordon, 98, Henke, 94, Rivera, 98, Page, 98. So cards that aren't necessarily used a ton right now, but definitely cards that were a part of the earlier meta. And once Mo Rivera hit, people gave him a try. Page, same boat there. Gordon, same boat there. Against lefties, he's similar to a lot of other right-handed pitchers that are a little bit weaker against lefties. A lot of the same comps there. So how well do you think Skip Lockwood would play just in a vacuum as well as in today's evolved meta?
He doesn't hold in the evolved meta. We were talking benchmarks before, things like 90, 95 control, 90, 85 movement, right? He's just short, right, in those kind of metrics. But if you're a budget player, even a player like me, this just short probably for me, but this is a really good card if you're a budget player. I mean, those comps are cards that were top tier a month, 2 months ago. And honestly, he could play, at a weaker diamond league, a high tier gold league, and he would be really good. You could even get away with him as like a low leverage avoid high leverage guy in a good diamond league. So I don't think this card is that bad. I think he's certainly playable. You could probably get him for pretty cheap. So, it's a budget card. That's what it is.
Moving on, we've got Gary Lavelli, and I believe I'm pronouncing that correct. 96 rated giant. And I find this card extremely, extremely interesting. And the first thing that came to my mind when I saw this rating profile is reverse Raleigh fingers. So take a look at the Raleigh 99 and reverse it. And I actually wrote down Raleigh's stats. So first, let's look at his verse right-handed batter column here. So Raleigh is 105, 76, 102. So a little bit better on the stuff, a little bit better on the control, pretty similar on the movement. And then verse right, Raleigh is 124, 89, 108. So effectively what Lavelli is to me is a poor man's version of a reverse Raleigh Fingers, and Raleigh Fingers is absolutely still a high level card today, one that I have in my bullpen in Perfect League. So a card that plays. Now the nuance of whether Lavelli will fit that same fate is he's a left-handed pitcher. So a left-handed reliever is in a slightly different boat than a right-handed reliever. You could have Raleigh in your pen and have him run into left-handed batters a whole lot less frequently, especially if you're doing things like starting left-handed pitching, which is sequencing a ton of right-handed batters after one another. Because in today's gameplay, you have a lot of people running a lot of right-handed batters. So that kind of makes Fingers a little bit more playable than he would be in a neutral setting. And then two, just with the available cards that are out there, is this left-handed arm good enough to supplant some names that are already within our bullpens? Your Eddie Plank, who's very dominant against left-handed batters. Your Randy Johnson. Other names that are already established within that pen that are going to bring significantly more stuff, perhaps more movement. That control number of 100 is pretty competitive there. But what do you think about this particular card, and where do you think it plays?
I like this card. I like this card a lot. I think we have a card here. If you're playing something that's going to be vulnerable to left-handed batters, like you're playing a lot of right-handed starters, you could certainly play this card in your bullpen. And a lot of people are playing right-handed starters right now. And he would be fantastic. Love the Raleigh Fingers comp. I just paid $80K for Raleigh Fingers. You could probably get this card for a lot cheaper, and he's going to play very, very well. Now, granted, not as many good matchups because he's only playing versus, you're hoping he's only playing versus left-handed batters, which there's not as many, right? But, I mean, one of the best in the game versus left-handed batters. And yeah, you're right. How does he compare versus Plank, Johnson? I think he's better. I mean, he's got higher control by a lot than Johnson. I don't remember Plank's control off the top of my head, but he's close.
Mid-90s or so.
Mid-90s, yeah. So he's better than him, in my opinion. I think the spread would be then. So yeah, I think this is an excellent card. Problem is going to be the splits. Does he get exploited? But really, again, like this card plays in the most competitive diamond leagues, I think. So, if you can pick this card up for 20, 30K, which I think you'll go for, I think it's a steal for a lot of people.
I think rarity is going to keep the price higher than that because it's going to take a while for Gary Lavelle's, and we have been corrected within the chat. It is Gary Lavelle. I think it's going to take a while for supply to pop up, and there's the novelty of the new card, and certain players, they don't like to sell their non-dupes. So I think that the price point will stay high for a while, and depending on the performance that we see coming out of Diamond Leagues in Perfect, I think that the price point could stay up there. If you just picked up Raleigh for 80, and if Lavelle's able to turn in results similar to a reverse Raleigh, I don't know that you're going to see this card down at 20 to 30K. So that might not come together as envisioned there.
I think even if he's 40 to 50, which you might see him at, I don't think he goes for what Raleigh goes for. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm sure he'll start high as most new cards do, but over the course of 2-3 weeks, right, you'll see him come down. 50 to 60, whatever. I think he'll be a good deal.
Very good. And before we move on, we've got a new icon to share. This has your Kidney's fave vote of approval here. Any other parting thoughts before we move on from Gary Lavelle?
I gotta shout out my friend Bill. He's made my friends Bill and Lorenzo have collabed to make your player of the week and my player of the week logos, and man, they did me dirty. But yeah, I mean, what can I say? That is George Wright, I believe's plaque that they modified just for me.
What that is that's Kidney's plaque now and forever.
Yeah. So I hope you guys enjoy that.
You've been emblazoned.
Yep.
Moving on, we've got Roger Peckinpah. And what I find so interesting, and I'd love to talk to a developer, talk to Chris about this, like there's a type. There's a type of glove-heavy player that just gets an identical score. They get 100 range, they get 110 error, they get 99 arm, and 99 TDP. So as you look at his glove similarity, there's 5 players with the exact same glove. So I'm curious if there's just not as much nuance that can be extracted from defensive numbers, and there's a certain statistical profile that yields this exact glove profile. But I guess that's neither here nor there. What you have is a very good glove for sure. So the question is, what kind of bat do you have here? And you've got a really rough contact avoid profile. You've got a base running profile that's not going to add significant value. So, and you've also got a 99 rated card, so not one that's going to save you any points in a cap tournament. Then, from a defense perspective, let's say he had stock defense across the diamond. That could increase the utility of a card like this, but we've just got shortstop. So I think what you're left with is a card that certainly won't play at the high end. As you look at the bat comps, there's not a name there that plays within Perfect League. And then again, because the card's rated 99, I'm not sure that there's a tournament that suits him either. But what do you think?
I just gotta say they gave all those cards this 100, kind of profile, all the dead ball cards, and they did my boy George Wright dirty. He gets the 97, 97, 97 comp. So I'm just a little sad about that personally. But I don't know. He's weak, man. It's probably one of the weaker 99s. I think the next card we're gonna look at, might be even weaker, but it's a rough one. I'm not exactly sure what's going on here. The 60 avoid Ks makes them pretty unplayable at a higher level. The defense certainly is good, but if I was playing in diamond or gold, I think I would rather have bronze Ozzy on my team because he's going to walk and he's going to run and he's going to field a bit better. So that would be my advice is I would play bronze Ozzy.
Very good. Moving on, we've got Earl Averill, another 99 rated card, and this one brings a lot more contact to the table. As I looked at this card, the first thing that I wrote down was early meta platoon bat. So early on in the game, months ago, before we've had the deluge of new content and new great hitters, I think that a 95 contact, 78 avoid profile, playing strong side platoon, and being able to play a corner defense, so stick him in a left field, that would have been arguably a decent move. I mean, you've got players like Torriente, and I know he's someone that we covered extensively last week, so we don't need to get back into the Torriente mold here. But just a bat that's not going to hurt you in a corner and a glove that's also not going to hurt you. The base running profile is not going to add a lot of value there. But I think today there's not really too much of a place for Averill. We do have one hit on the OPS table, so his fourth comp for versus right-handed batters, or right-hand pitching, excuse me, is Roy Campanella. And Roy Campanella versus righties is a 639 OPS hitter. And so this is Averill's strong side. And if his strong side is an OPS sub 650, there's really not a place for him. But what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, he's favorable on the 650, right, with plus 12 avoid K. But I mean, yeah, you said it best. I mean, what is he max? He hits maybe 700 V right, and then he hits sub 550 V left. Like he's not going to make it in high level play, and 76 range has become unplayable in the corners. I mean, we're talking about 80 being maybe a DH only now with Cobb and Musial, right, is the discussion that's been hot the past 2 weeks. And, I'm playing Musial now and left, and it's negative zone rating, right? So I don't think 76 plays in the corner anymore. And I think when you're talking about early platoon bat and one of his good comps is Carl Yaz, I mean, that's exactly what he is, right? He's Carl Yaz. He's a bit better than Carl Yaz, I think, but certainly nothing to look up to. I mean, I would see this as just a worse Luis Gonzalez, and Luis Gonzalez right now is probably like a 35, 40K card, and he struggles to perform at all. So, yeah.
I think one thing that we'd be well served to do right now is just reiterate a disclaimer that we provided for this stream and streams past, that the feedback that we're providing is really applicable to Diamond Leagues and above. And so as we're sitting here saying that this card won't play or that card won't play or doesn't fit the current meta, if you're in a bronze league or you're in a silver league, and the reality is most teams within the Perfect Team universe are short of diamond right now. So don't take our feedback here about whether or not this card doesn't have a place in the existing meta, don't take that to mean that it's a quick sell. Compare it to what you've got within your lineup today. The out of the park compare button is a huge asset for you. Compare those ratings and build your team from there. It's quite possible you're in a bronze league or a silver league, you pull this card and he's immediately going to be your best left field option. So again, just filter our feedback through an understanding that we're talking about how do these cards, all of these cards, really compare to the very best cards in the game, not necessarily in a vacuum. If you're in a bronze league, Earl Averill will earn you a lot of perfect points.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's something you always have to take what we're talking to the 2%, the top of the league, right? That's who we're targeting. And if you want to improve, maybe try and learn some of our advice. Take a look at my spreadsheet. If you want, DM me on Discord and I'll try and give you some pointers, and take a look at the Discord if you haven't been. And people love to help out other people on there. Take a look at the roster advice channel, and look at some budget options, man. There's some bronze cards that can play better than some diamonds, if you don't know what you're doing, right? So there's a lot of ways to improve. It's very easy to hit gold and hit even diamond, if you get some good pointers. So yeah, we're here to, we're just here to help, and we're here to try and make people improve, right?
All right, let's amp it up a little bit. This is arguably the biggest and best card we got tonight. We've got the 100 Hail Newhouser, the card that I was most excited to see. I think it's not as cut and dried, though. It's not as cut and dry as this is a great card. This is one you want to have. I think it's a more nuanced discussion. So as we look at it here, you have a profile that's obviously much better against left-handed pitchers. 159, 88, 80. So you're getting 18 more stuff. You're getting 10 more movement. You're getting 3 more control, all versus the platoon side of left-handed batters. As we look at the pitch values, everything's up there, topped with the slider at 110. So this is a card that's going to stuff boost in the pen. I'm not sure if we've seen one pulled yet and seen evidence of exactly what that stuff boost is going to be, but it's going to be very significant. It's going to amp this one up into the 170, 180 range versus left-handed batting. So that's all fine and good. Now, the discussion we were having earlier today is with regards to the new threshold for control. How good does control need to be for a card not to be a major liability? Because as much as it's delightful to see the 12 and 13 and 14K per 9 statistics generated, when you pair that with a 5, 6, or 7 walk per 9, and then you see box scores where he walks in the winning run, that'll drive you crazy enough and have him sending to your reserves. As we look at who he profiles most closely, let's first look at his versus lefties table. And what we've got here is Bob Feller. So Feller is actually like a reverse Newhouser. So it's funny that Feller is his closest comp here, but he's basically a Feller with more stuff versus lefties, more movement versus lefties, and then critically more control. And then his next best comp versus lefties is Pedro. And Pedro is obviously the best card in the game right now. So it's great to have him as your comp. However, look at where they deviate. He deviates in control. And as you just got done saying a couple minutes ago, control is the most important category. So we can't expect Hal Newhouser to deliver that 3.75 perfect league FIP there because the control is so different there. Other comps within the table for lefty are Satchel Paige and Randy Johnson, and you can see their various success there. I think Randy Johnson in my sample, which is the last couple years of Perfect League, has probably overperformed and is unsustainably that low. Now jumping over to his V right profile, you've got Kerry Wood and Sandy Koufax as our closest comp here. Kerry Wood is actually a very close comp. So same stuff, 1 more movement, 4 more control, but you have to keep in mind that Kerry Wood's going to have the same side advantage. So Kerry Wood is likely to either be neutral or outperform, and he carries that 4.3 FIP on a relatively small sample. So I think that the first question is, will this card play in Perfect League? And I think the answer is yes. But the more nuanced question, I think, is going to be how? How is this card optimally deployed? Are we looking at a stopper? Are we looking at a specialist and worrying about how many innings they're going to get? Or are we looking at someone who's really optimally deployed as a follower? Someone who you find a lineup that's got a bunch of left-handed batters when they face a right-handed starting pitcher, and you go ahead and get this guy to mow down that lineup and face 6 or 7 or 8 left-handed batters starting in inning 2 and beyond. But I've definitely stolen the mic from you, so I'll stop for a minute and give you a chance to share your thoughts about this card.
I know you love this card. It's okay. I don't know. I'm looking at it, and what worries me the most is we have a left-handed pitcher with 78 movement versus right-handed batters. And right now we're in a meta where people are playing a lot of right-handed power bats. I mean, we're looking at Mays, we're looking at DiMaggio, we're looking at Hornsby. Even Cobb can hit home runs, right? So, I mean, it's scary world out there for Newhouser, which is why I think this card is strictly bullpen, right? He's strictly a follower, strictly probably for me, strictly a late innings guy, because I don't want this guy going long. I only want this guy in a good matchup, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't know, man. I think strictly late innings, right? He has 3 pitches, and I think we saw Walter Johnson with 3 pitches get some absurd stuff boost. So my normal 15 to 20 for really good pitches kind of went out the water. So I'm not sure what he's going to get. I put him in with 15 to my database, and the results weren't great. He hit 7 overall, which is not playable in Perfect League, actually. So let's say he gets 20. I think he would hit like number 2 or 3, probably below Gagne and Hoffman. And I would still say, personally, not playable. Now, he's competing really left-handed side, right? His really competition is going to be like Randy Johnson, right? And if we look at it, it's a lot more stuff for a lot less control, right? And we were talking about stuff versus control. What's it worth, right? Well, I have it worth about 1.5 points in the bullpen. So I actually think it favors Newhouser versus Randy. Mm-hmm. So do you play him over Randy if you're playing Randy? Maybe. But this is only versus left. So I'm looking at him like a specialist, late innings. You could play him. That's about where I think he serves fit.
Yeah, and I think Randy is low 80s or most mid 80s on the control. And I think his stuff boost takes him into the neighborhood of 140. So Newhouser will have significantly more stuff. Now, the reality is Randy, despite his fit value here from the last couple of years versus left-handed batters, it hasn't exactly been faring great within the Perfect League. He's certainly not a starter anymore. And because his splits are pretty neutral, there's less of a role for him within the bullpen. So I think it's an interesting debate. Now, we didn't really have a card like this yet. We didn't have that Bob Feller. We didn't have the Gooden. We didn't have what we have now for VR. We didn't have that for versus left-handed batting, and I think we have it now in Newhouser. So the good news is that provides another layer of choice for out-of-the-park managers. Like, do you want to go with a more volatile option that's got a lot more stuff and less control and gamble? And I think we've all seen pitchers like Kerry Wood and Bob Feller, have ridiculous seasons. And I think having that option, having that arrow in the quiver for Hell Newhouser could open up that choice, which is good. I think it's always good to have more choice. And I think it's actually bad sometimes to have just a across the board better player. So for that reason, I really like Newhouser. And it's actually my favorite. So kudos to me for calling out the only 100 rated card and calling that my favorite. So, real tough call there, DRC. But this is my favorite card within the collection and the favorite one that we're talking about today. And I kind of buried the lead up at the top of the screen here. I was supposed to call out that we now do show the FIP ratings there. So I was glad we were able to talk about that some. And Dave, you asked the question of if there are lineups in Perfect League with 6 and 7 left-handed batters versus a right-hand starting pitching. You're correct in that that's not the norm. Most will have 4 right-handed batters. A lot of them will have 5. Your right-hand cheese running teams might even have 6 or 7. But there are teams that are still running your traditional platoons, that their VR lineup still has six left-handed batters. The Newton Sloths come to mind, and there was another couple teams that I played today that fit that mold. And I know it because I tried to set up an opportunity for my left-hand pitching to get in there and face a lineup of six lefties. So you're correct in that it's not the norm, but it does exist. Moving on, so we're going ahead and leaving fall phenoms behind and moving into player of the month. And we're starting with Chris Coughlin, a former Cub, although this card here is a Marlins card from 2009. The profile itself is heavy on contact, which is great. You love to see that in silver. I moonlighted as a silver tournament player for a couple of months before Wait Till Next Year kicked me out. And this card is definitely one that the ratings don't scare you off of the bat, but then once you slide to the right side of the screen and you see it's a DH only, I'm not sure that it still remains in the conversation. But what do you think?
So I talked to the Devil, and Wait Till Next Year was kind to say he actually quite likes this card as a DH. And he's at least willing to give it a shot, so I think that speaks for itself. I mean, versus right, that's a great profile. I mean, I would play this card at a budget like up to silver. I mean, versus righties, I mean that's a pretty great profile with almost 70 avoid K and 90 contact. I mean, it's just good. So I think at silver, this card probably slaps right-handed pitching. So I like it. It's probably great silver tourneys, and that's about it.
Yeah, so I know you're the expert here, so I'll just tee it up and let you talk. But if my understanding is correct, this profile here would actually rank pretty highly in your BABIP metric. And again, why don't you walk the viewers through how that works and how contacts isn't really a backup card stat?
Right. So everything you know about contact is a lie. It doesn't actually exist. So what contact is it's an amalgam. It's a combination. It's really power plus avoid Ks plus a third stat you don't see called BABIP. And so BABIP is batting average in balls in play. So when your card actually hits the ball and it goes in play, BABIP determines if the ball is a hit or if it's fielded and it's an out. So the contact stat, if your power is low, like on this card, and your Ks are low, this card is decent Ks, but they're not great, nothing to write home about. And your contact's high, like this card, your BABIP is pretty good. So this card is pretty great BABIP. And when it hits the ball, it's going to be in play and it'll hit it into the gap, speaking in real baseball terms. Obviously, it's a simulation, and it'll get hits a lot. So this card is going to hit a lot. It'll hit consistently. It'll be a lot of doubles card, kind of, and it'll be good.
Very good. So moving on, we've got Maury Wills. And I know Rich was sharing the anecdote about the MVP season that Maury Wills had and how he won that over Willie Mays. And as I looked at this card, I kind of saw that same ideal profile for BABIP, where you've got the high contact, the low power. I think that you'd probably want the contact to be some higher and the avoid Ks maybe to be a bit lower, but I'll let you speak to that. The speed profile is good, but again, you've got the fly in the ointment, which is the speed being 7 points higher than the stealing. Perhaps because both are high, that's not going to hurt you too much. The base running solid at 100. You've got a good bunt for hit here, which might be a strategic tool that you can use your sliders for your player sliders for Maury Wills and extract some value there. And then defensively, coming stock with only shortstop, but it's a pretty good shortstop. 91 range, 89 turn double play. Arm's a little weak. But overall, an interesting card. I'd be curious to hear from someone who plays a lot of gold tournaments about how well they think this card fits in.
So I asked, and he delivered, our gold tournament expert, Mr. API, about Maury Willis. And basically, he's good, but there's a card called Buck Herzog. I am not familiar, but I trust API with my life. And basically, Buck Herzog is a little faster, and he's got about a little bit better defense. So the problem with this card is he doesn't quite have the bat to make up for the slightly worse stealing metrics, like you were talking. You want stealing actually higher than your speed because speed is your aggressiveness and stealing is your success rate, right? And then infield range is a little bit too low. It's 91. He was saying if it was like 96, 97 ish, that it would be successful, right? So I see somebody in the chat saying if Herzog and Ozzy are better, right? And that's what I was told, the same exact thing. Herzog and Ozzy, you'd play like Herzog is your utility and Ozzy is your starter. Are pretty much just a little bit better than this card for gold tourneys. I still think this is a really cool card. It's just got a unique profile. It's fast, it's okay defense, and it's got a really cool contact profile and this nice cool crescent moon that I'd like to see more often.
Moving on, we've got Chris Medlin, reliever for the Braves. I know Chris Medlin did start earlier in his career, so I think it would have been beneficial if this card was released as a starter with these same ratings here, because then you could count on a decent stuff boost coming from that 94 curveball. But alas, it is not so, and you're left with a 24 stamina reliever, and it's a 90 instead of an 89, which means you can't play him in gold tournaments. So I'm curious how well a split dominant righty, although he does have some funny play there where he has more stuff versus left-hand batters. I'm curious where this card can fit in.
In gold as a relief pitcher. Interestingly, 24 stamina is cool. He probably could pitch 2 innings on that, which is very unique. You don't see that too often. Comps aren't great if you look across the board. It's mainly some not so great cards. He does comp to Mike Gonzalez, but again, those are good gold cards. And like you said, he's a 90s, so he can't play in gold tournaments. But he could play in Gold League, I think, as a solid relief pitcher option. Maybe a specialist type middle reliever that you don't play in like high leverage. And I think that's about it.
Moving on, we've got JD Martinez. And the first thing that I saw with this card was just how generous they were with the glove. Like, I've seen JD Martinez play outfield, and there is no way that he deserves a 54, 50, 60. I mean, what he really deserves is something closer to this. Chris Coughlin menu of ratings that says this is a card that really should be a DH, but because he's got a big contract and because he wants to, get out in the field and not be stuck on the bench all day, they let him play some left field. But the bat itself, obviously a lot better versus left-hand pitching. Significantly better contact, significantly better power and gap, better eye, slightly better avoid Ks. It's a low diamond card. As far as who he comps to here, you've got Andres Galarraga as his number 1 comp versus lefties, which was a card that many people use on their path up the way through their various leagues, but not a card that is all that competitive now. Sixto Lascano, and another similar card, very good card versus left-handed pitching, but one really designed for lower levels. So I think what you have here, again, is a card that's going to do a whole lot better in lower levels and really doesn't have a place in Diamond Leagues today, and I would question whether a Diamond tournament would welcome him either.
Yeah, I don't see him fitting in a Diamond tournament. Again, the issue is just avoid Ks. We touched on it last week. I'll touch on it again. The issue with avoid Ks is they should really be called contact, because avoid Ks is, does your batter hit the ball? Mm-hmm. If you don't hit the ball, you're not doing anything, right, at the plate. So really, it's the most important hitting stat there is, I think, in my opinion, right now, with how the current meta is shaped up. And having 50, we were talking the benchmark is at least 80. And if you really want to be elite, it's got to be higher than that, right? Unless you have some absurd stats like a Hornsby. And then outfield, we were saying 80 range is the minimum. He's got 50 again. And then he's got 16 speed. And, so really all around just kind of lacking. He's not going to hit that well. He's not going to field well. So not going to do much.
I would stop short of signing off on your argument for the lower threshold of avoid Ks. I've actually been witnessing high avoid Ks being a negative thing in Perfect League, and maybe this is me with my tinfoil hat on, but perhaps you'll agree with me. But cards like Joe DiMaggio are having a really hard time producing within certain parks. and my park being one that suppresses extra base hits, and then for right-handed batters suppresses average and home run. Like hitters like him that have that high avoid K, Cal Ripken comes to mind as well. Like they really have a hard time putting up numbers, whereas a card like a Hornsby or a Cobb, which has a much lower avoid K, although I think Cobb would be over the threshold you stated, are able to really tap into their what makes them great hitters a whole lot easier. I'm curious if you have formulated opinion on something like that.
Well, I honestly just think you compared like my number 10 hitter and my number 15 hitter to like the clear cut two best hitters. So it's a rough comparison, right? There is some metrics with certain parks messing with contact profile hitters, and I think Ripken suffers a little bit from the right-handed pitcher meta. Like I think Ripken is a really, really good card that's underperforming right now. Like I think he's a steal at his current price. I love him, and I think he's gonna do really well someday. But not right now. He's a little underperforming. But I think it's more like the big Roger Connor versus Musial debate, right? And I think there's merit to both, given your park and your lineup, right? And I think it's really just how you build, right?
Yeah, and I think you're tapping into something. I've just been running the same park for so many weeks on end now. I'm seeing what has to be trends and not just individual anecdotes. So like Ripken, I just haven't been able to get to hit at all, and I see his left-handed pitching profile should be dominant, and he's really not producing dominant splits. Like even when you break down his split performance, he's not over or even approaching 800 OPS. Whereas cards like Honus Wagner SE, it's a card that you look at the back of it and you compare it to Ripken VL, and you'd think that Ripken would just blow him out of the water, and it's a whole lot closer than you'd think. And so I find that interesting, and haven't fully formulated an opinion as to why that's going on. I think that some people within the chat are hitting on some potential things that it could be, specifically within some of these BABIP depressed parks. But I think you can't just look at the back of a card and know what's going to happen. There's a lot more factors, and that's really that next level when you start saying, okay, not only how good is this card, not only where does it rank on Kidney's sheet, but how well is it going to play in the park that I'm running and in the strategy that I'm running.
Just two more notes on Ripken. So first off, he just won Batter of the Month for me, like right now, in my Diamond League. He's been a monster lately for me. But second off, he has actually the lowest BAPIP in my top 37 on my spreadsheet. So if you're running a BAPIP suppressed park, he is really gonna struggle, right? And I think that's probably the meta right now. Is a lot of people have shifted from those offensive heavy parks to more defensive ones with that latest wave of Face of the Franchise endgame pitching, right? And we're seeing a lot more defense being played. And so I think he's really underperforming because of that. So if we see a more offensive heavy meta come back, I think he might ride that wave. And talking about Ripken, Fabic.
Moving on, we've got George Collar, 94 rated card, right-handed starting pitcher. Reverse splits on the stuff, but traditional splits on the movement and the control. It's a ground ball pitcher, but the control is just so low. We've talked a lot tonight about minimum threshold for control and really what can happen when you do have those low control ratings. And this card would really be annihilated and walk the world in a high-level league.
Yeah, I mean, I love ground ball pitchers. I love high movement pitchers because I had a small addiction to them in Perfect League 20. But the control, man, it's low. Also, screwball pitchers are really cool because they have reverse splits most of the time. This one doesn't have too drastic splits, actually, which is interesting. I'd love to see the actual stats on this card. Look them up in Baseball Reference or whatever. But yeah, not much to talk about here. He's going to get hit pretty hard even at lower levels. So.
And I think it'll be less about the hitting and just more about the walks. Like he's going to get hit plenty, but the problem is his walks per 9 is going to be north of 6, even in like a standard diamond league, even a gold league.
Wrong choice words on my part. It's I'm a little tired. I didn't sleep well.
I know you've got those broken fingers you're working off, so we'll try to keep it easy on you.
Yep.
Next card we've got is Brad Lidge. And this one kind of jumps off the page just for the stuff numbers. 179 versus right, which might be, and I know you'll keep me honest on this, but that might be the highest stock on any traditional reliever. And I know Feller and Walter go over that once you move them to the pen, but a traditional reliever, I think that could be our highest. And as we look at the left versus left-handed batters, 157 is no slouch. So I would guess, and I actually don't see him, but I would have guessed that Kerry Wood would have been a comp here. I think Lidge probably has too good of control and maybe too much stuff to comp to Wood, or maybe Wood's not in here because he's not a reliever. But there's a lot going on here. Much of what we've talked about tonight talks about control thresholds, and the control threshold's not met here. The movement isn't great, but if you're just a pure stuffist, he could probably do some real damage in a low-level league as a closer, racking up many saves on end.
So ding, ding, ding. This is our new champion. This is our new pure stuff card. Previous man is your verse right in your overall comparison at Craig Kimbrell at 172 verse right. So yeah, I mean, what this is this is a card you want to pull when you're in rookie league, and you want to pump this into your pen, and you want to say, man, I'm going to get a lot of points because I'm going to get a lot of 3-0 innings, right, where he just strikes out the side. He's not going to play for you probably past gold, right? After gold, he's going to start getting hit up because he's got low movement, right, and lower control. I mean, honestly, his stuff is high enough. He might play in Diamond okay. He can play in Diamond okay.
I think he's a much better Kerry Wood. And I know Kerry Wood survived multiple seasons on end in Diamond. However, that was all before Face of the Franchise. So you don't see Wood anymore. This is a better version of him. I think Lidge, year to year, could work.
Yeah. In a not like a DLL or maybe an OL or a BFF, like in a lower competitive Diamond League, he plays, sure. You try and pull him in perfect, you'll probably get hammered. But anything else, it's a good card. Sure.
A fun card nonetheless. Good. I love it when
this is a very fun card. You'll have a blast playing this thing.
Yeah, lots of strikeouts. Moving on, we've got Corbin Burns. And the card art for these really feels like something out of the... do you remember that All-Star game where the jerseys were all weird? I think it was the one in Milwaukee that didn't even end up finishing. But the card art here reminds me of something out of that generation. Like it just seems dated to that era. But card art aside, this is a high gold that brings a lot of stuff to the table. Now, it's important to note this is listed as a starter. So you are going to get the stuff boost when you move it to the pen. And the stuff boost should be pretty significant because you've got 3 very highly rated cards here, highly rated pitches. From a stamina perspective, he's only 51. But I would be curious to hear if you've got feedback from API on how well this fits into the gold tourney scene.
Just a note, Walsh is next. The slides are one out of order. So he is coming. I forgot this card is listed as a starter. That's excellent. I know API is really high on this card, so I don't have the actual stuff numbers. I'm assuming it's probably in the 10 to 15 range. This card is endgame gold tourney reliever. Excellent. I mean, with that stamina, it's 51, so low end for starter, but I mean, this is still 2 innings out of the pen, right? He's got super high stuff, and he'll light things up in a gold tourney. So, yeah, this is a card to watch out for breaking the gold tourney meta, I think. He's really good.
Awesome. Moving on, we've got Jared Walsh, and apologies to DishNet. We got one out of order here. So we've got a silver left fielder, no speed, little defense, and then from a bat profile perspective, a little low on the contact and really low on the avoid Ks. He is bringing some power to the table, but how much is that power worth?
Yeah, I don't know. It looks like he plays first base okay, which is something to note for him. And 70 contact versus right isn't horrible, and he comps to low golds. I mean, doesn't look unplayable for something. I mean, at a really low level, you could certainly throw him in as maybe a utility kind of guy. I hear he pitches really terribly because I guess he started off the year or maybe last year as a starting pitcher, which is just an interesting factoid. So, yeah.
Very good. So that's Jared Walsh. Moving on, we got Trevor Bauer, one of the more outspoken Major League Baseball players. And here we've got a card that is really low on movement. I'm curious to see Bauer be such a low movement guy. I'm sure that's built off of home run per nine numbers, which are not beneficial or not favorable to him. But that's really the fly in the ointment on this one. You've got decent stuff. You've got passable control for a low diamond, but really just unacceptable movement.
Yeah, the movement is going to hurt him. Like I mentioned earlier with one of the other cards, the high stuff, okay control is like a kind of pitcher archetype that you can find to be a little flexible, a little bit playable at a lower level because as long as they don't walk the batter, they have the chance to strike them out before they get the hit due to the order of operations, right? So there's with decent splits on this card, there's a chance he's not actually bad at a lower level. So this card could play up to gold probably fine if you pull up. And that's probably what he's good for.
If this card was an 89, do you think it becomes a gold tourney card?
Oh, absolutely. If not for starting for the pen, I mean, he would be great out of the pen, I think.
And a lot of those comps you see in the table over here are high gold cards.
Yep. Yeah.
Moving on, we've got Dinelson Lamet, another starting pitcher. This one's a fly ball pitcher variety. You don't see a ton of those. I'm curious if you've ever looked at the numbers here, but I feel like the fly ball pitcher is the rarest of the tendency pitchers. And then from a ratings perspective, better against righties. A little weak on the control side, definitely weak on the movement, but you're getting a lot of stuff for it. Because of that, you're going to want to push him to the pen and lean on those very highly rated pitches to boost up, and for him to be like a Kerry Wood type flamethrower in the pen. Maybe that matched with the fly ball profile. If you're playing in a lower level league and you've got home runs depressed, maybe this card becomes playable in that specific circumstance. What do you think?
Yeah, so lower level leagues, it's going to be like, your budget. Like we talked about what you do with Brad Lidge is you put him in there, you hope he strikes out a bunch of guys and racks you up some CP, right? Like you were mentioning with the fly ball pitchers, they are rarer than ground ball pitchers, which is kind of cool. Extreme fly ball pitchers are like extraordinarily rare this year. Yeah, so that's what you can do with them. I think there's a really interesting tidbit or Silver Expert put in chat that 78 Coughlin he has projecting to hit 260 in a tough diamond league versus right, which is really impressive. So I'm very interested to see how that card does in silver tournaments going forward.
That's some next level analysis brought to you by Wait Till Next Year. Moving on, we've got Ke'Bryan Hayes. And so I know Ke'Bryan Hayes from my fantasy baseball pursuits as a baseball prospect coming up that people didn't expect to hit. He was expected to be a Gold Glove caliber player at third base, but not expected to do much with the bat. So what he's done so far this year, and even winning a Player of the Rookie of the Month award, is very notable. And we'll see if that follows through and he becomes a true impact bat at the major league level. As we look at his particular card that we see in front of us here, I think he got cheated a little bit on the defensive side, only being 77 range, 80 air, 71 arm, and then the DP being really low. I think he could have been boosted there. But the offensive side is really not bad. You've got a very meaningful avoid K. You've got good contact. The gap power obviously stands out. It is a diamond. I think this card, like many, would be a lot more interesting if it were a high gold and then probably become something very, very valuable. But what do you think this card can do?
So if we're looking at this purely from a competitive standpoint, I love Ke'Bryan Hayes, mainly for my offline games. I always pick him up. He's an extraordinary third base prospect. But if we look at the top comp is George Kell, right? George Kell is just a better hitter, a bit worse of a fielder, but he's also 3 points lower of an overall, right? So if you're trying to play a cap tournament or even a diamond tournament, you're probably going to pick George Kell over Brian Hayes, right? The only real advantage this card has is like a few more gap points, and gap is applied after the hit happens. So what that means is it decides whether or not the ball in play is a hit, and then it decides, okay, is this single going to be an extra base hit? So it's already a hit. So just applying an extra base to it doesn't really have that much value. So gap is probably the least value of the back of the card 5, really, right? So it's not that valuable. It's a cool card. It's not a bad card for a low diamond, right? But just a little bit outclassed by kind of its competitors. If you look at the similarity, George Kell, Jose Reyes, Tony Fernandez are all very good low diamond cards, right?
Yeah, so George Kell was a card that I used for probably 5 or 6 seasons on the way up, probably spanning something in the realm of rookie all the way up through, silver, somewhere in that realm. It was a very, very useful card, one that, at least at the time, was a great value card that could compete with the cards that were significantly more expensive. And he'll always hold a special place in my heart because in my first ever Perfect League championship in Stone level or whatever level it was, so definitely not Perfect League, he hit the game-winning walk-off homer in Game 7 of that. So George Kell will always have a place in Naperville Nomad lore.
That's awesome.
Moving on, Jose Ramirez, 93 rated card, coming with stock defense at third base. I think they could have very easily given him second base as well, as Ramirez has played some second base in the majors. It's a card that comes with low avoid, K, and low I, and then loads up on the contact gap and power. To the point you made before, its strongest asset here is the gap, which is arguably the least valuable of the 5 categories. From a base stealing perspective, there is some value to be extracted here. Good speed, great steal rating, and then a solid base running rating, so you can get some good BSR out of him. Defensively, very acceptable profile at third, not someone that's going to be driving excess war with that rating profile, but someone who can be at third and you not freak out about it in a low-level league.
Yeah, so this is another low-level diamond, right? He's not going to do anything at the high levels. He'll probably cost you at a higher level, but low level, you play him at third base, he's okay. It's a shame he's not taller. I'm sorry, that's like a personal attack on you, but you got first base level defense and you're 5'9". It's just how it is. If you don't know, OTP has a built-in thing. If you are under 6 foot, you lose first base rating the shorter you are. Sorry, short people or Jose Altuve. It's just how it is. Yeah, he plays a mean first base if he were about to gain 3 inches. Yeah, that's about it.
All right, I think this is our last card from the content set tonight, meaning that our next card is a bonus card.
Yes, sir.
Noodles Han.
Let's go.
So we're saving the best for last here. This was a tournament card. I want to say there's only a handful in circulation, 2 or 3 maybe. But definitely a very interesting card to look at here. Left-handed pitcher. One that's got almost mirror splits side to side. And so as you look at how well he'd perform versus a right-hand batting lineup, 133, 92, 92, that's certainly very competitive as you compare it with other left-handed starter options out there. He's basically Randy Johnson with a lot more movement and a lot more control. Looking at the comp table, I do see him on there as well. So a very interesting card. Definitely one that you could debate as to where he belongs, but one that if everyone had a copy, they'd all be in play. What do you think?
Interesting card, man. It's just so well balanced. I have him number 10 overall, 6V left, 41V right, which is just excellent splits, right? I mean, you can just look at this card; it's almost perfect splits. He's got a really good. I don't want to say split again, but I will say it's split of stuff, movement, control. It's well divided. He's my fourth lefty. Is Spawn, then Price, then Glavin, then Han. But he's, I think, the most well balanced of. No, Spawn is the most well balanced, and then you have this card, right? So he's probably the second lefty I would actually start if I were to start left-handed pitching. So just a really excellent card. He's really solid overall. He's a ground ball pitcher. I love me some good ground ball pitching, as we know. So yeah, I mean, if I wanted to play lefty cheese, I'm putting Spawn out. I'm trying to get a Han. I know there's only 2 in existence, man, but I'm trying to get one out there. And yeah, I love this card.
And I think you touched on a good point there, that he's behind only debatably Spawn. And then other than Spawn, I wouldn't really argue that there is a left-hand pitcher that you just lock into your lineup and say, okay, I know he's going to face 7 right-handed batters and 8 right-handed batters at times, and I don't care because he's that good. I think he could arguably be one of those guys, whereas your David Price, your Randy Johnson, your Eddie Plank, you're asking for trouble if you're just locking them into your lineup, unless you're running a park that is really suited for it. And even then, which I do, I run that park, you still get beat with it. So I think that you touched on something good. It's really Han and Spawn, the Rhyming brothers, that are the only 2 options as your lock and load left-hand starting pitching, and everything else is a bit of a gamble. Would you agree with that assessment?
I'm looking at it. I think you throw the SE lefty Grove in there, probably as the 3rd option, right? If we're locking and loading starting pitching. But after them, there's some people I feel are falling off, right? There's Plank, there's Johnson, there's Hubble. I feel like those are cards that are sliding a bit. Then you have the more split heavy guys like Price or Glavin, who are, more risky options, right? So they're more like a follower based or a bullpen based, or if you're running full cheese, then maybe you play them, right? So he's very solid. If you're running a balanced, like a classic 3 right-handed, 2 left-handed approach, or you're just running a full left-handed, this is a card you need to have. I think almost any team that could get their hands on this card would play this card, right?
Yeah, and I think you brought up a good point. So when I was providing my commentary, I was not including Glavin, and I wasn't including the Lefty Grove SC. I was really only considering those cards that are widely available right now for people to pick up. To get a Lefty Grove or to get a Glavin, you're going to need to reach into the checkbook pretty deep to be able to afford one of those cards. I think Glavin is still north of $1 million, and I don't recall seeing what the last Lefty Grove went for, but I know it's probably still north of at least 500K. So much sparser cards to get your hand on, but arguably are part of this conversation as well. If you do aspire to run a full left-hand starting pitching rotation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we saw Lefty Cheese win Perfect League not too long ago, so it's certainly viable, man.
So that's all the cards, guys. We had 12 Phenoms. We had 12 Players of the Month, which I didn't grab the screen cap from it, so I'm just showing you half the party here. And then we had the one Noodles that we took a look at the end. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the content. Hopefully you'll join us next week. If this was your first time on one of our streams, make sure you come back on Thursdays for This Week in Perfect Team. Also, keep in mind that tonight I announced 2 other shows that we'll be doing. So on Sunday, I'm going to be announcing the Perfect League World Series, and we'll continue to do so each week as long as I am in the Perfect League. So if that gives you a little extra reason to root for me to hang around and continue to make the playoffs in Perfect League, awesome. And then on Tuesday, we've got a brand new show coming at you guys called Reading Between the Lineups, in which I'll be interviewing one of the key players within the Out of the Park player community. And I'll save the surprise for now, but you guys will find out in advance of Tuesday, and we're certainly excited for that. So Kidneys, before we take off, any closing thoughts for everyone?
I'm just happy to be back. I love doing this. It's so much fun. I can't wait for next week. We'll have Chris back. It'll be a great time. It was fun having Rich for his time today. But, man, Chris brings some great energy to the stream, so I'm excited to see what he's got for us in store. I don't remember if it's playoffs next week or not. And yeah, guys, hit that follow button so you can see with us next week. Vulcan, I see you asking about the relief pitchers. I literally just deleted the calculation for the relief pitchers on the spreadsheet, so that's fixed now. Guys, hit the follow button, follow us. You get catch all DRCs. Got some amazing content on this channel. Hit the subscribe button because it's shiny and new, and I always wanted to say that on a channel before, so I can say it now. It's awesome. This is so great to be here and do this. It's surreal to have so many of you guys, enjoying this kind of content. Love doing it. It's been amazing. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, I couldn't have said it any better myself. So the DRC and Kidneys signing off. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.